Hi, and welcome back to Beneath the Busy, the space where we explore the deeper psychological drivers behind our behavior and get to examine how we can live and lead more effectively. This is a really special episode because it's my first guest interview, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Dr. Shirley Zinn. She's a woman that I admire and have been inspired by for many years. She's held numerous heads of HR positions, both private and public sector. She's currently a member of a number of boards. And so I couldn't think of a better person who has extensive experience in leadership, in what it takes to be an effective HR professional, and just in being a human in the world today and navigating life's challenges. I'm so appreciative of Shirley's time and her generosity in sharing her knowledge and her insights and her experience. And so excited to share this conversation with you all. But before we dive into the conversation, as always, let's just take a moment to pause. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just take a moment to take a deep breath, drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and just give yourself the opportunity to be present to this incredible conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I was thinking this morning, it's a little bit of a fangirl moment for me because I really have kind of looked up to you and respected you and been so inspired by you for years. So to have this one-on-one time just feels like a real gift. So thanks, Shirley. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lauren, also for having me. It's such an honor that we connected when we did, and we kept the connection going. And I'm always amazed how one manages to do that with people where there's just a resonance and a connection and a sharing of common purpose around some key values. And I really love the work that you're doing, and I'm very honored to be on your podcast with you today.
And you are my first guest. So I've been kind of soloing it for a while, a couple of episodes, and then decided to get other people's voices and knowledge. And I thought to start with you as my first guest would be just amazing because of your exposure and your experience, both leadership, HR. I know we had a conversation a few years ago about mental health in the workplace. So it felt like you really epitomize the intersection of that. And also you're a human being and a woman in the workplace and all those, all those categories that are just, it kind of, I thought you would be so, I've got so many questions and thoughts to share with you just across your varied experience. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. But maybe before I jump in with all my questions, if you can maybe just share with us a few minutes, just a little bit about your background, who you are, what you're currently busy with, because I can read your bio, but I prefer to hear from everybody's own mouth, their background and story.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So just a little bit about my journey. I was born and bred in Cape Town. I grew up on the Cape Flats during apartheid. I was born in 1961. Just to give you some context, not to give away my age, but it was pretty much a time of deep, fragmentation of society, of deep racism, of socioeconomic challenges of incredible note, where people are pushed to the periphery, not only of the spatial and geographical world that they live in, but also, intentional displacement and dispersion into the periphery of society to struggle and to not to flourish and live the lives that they were meant to live. And so it is with that background and with parents who did not finish their high school, but somehow understood that education would be our liberation. And when I say our, I talk about my sister and I. I have a sister that is 3 years younger than I am. And my big responsibility was always to be taking care of my sister, because my mom and dad, they worked in very low level jobs, and we lived in what was then called a council house for people like my father and his family who had been displaced from District 6. and had to go on waiting lists for, basic housing in faraway places with very little infrastructure, with very little health, education, and other social support, large levels of poverty and unemployment, gender-based violence, and plenty of challenges. We still have them. I mean, the gangsterism story is all over the newspapers every day. But within all of that, somehow, with a little bit of support and assistance and guidance from an early age, we found a way to say, that in the seemingly impossible situation, there is possibility. And my father, from a
Mm,
very, very early age, would talk to us about, let's not get stuck here. Let's try and make something from nothing. Let's try to
mm,
educate ourselves so that we can get out of this situation and we can be more financially capable of taking care of ourselves and being independent and so he started to talk about that when we were really before primary school, even when those seeds were planted. And my mom, on the flip side, would talk about things like values. So she didn't use the fancy word values, but she used to talk about respect for other human beings, and she used to talk about excellence and hard work and just doing everything to the best of your ability. No matter how difficult your circumstances are, just give up your best every day. She talked about humility, and not the kind of humility that is a sign of weakness, but humility that is a sign of courage, that if you fall
mm,
over, you can get back up again. It's okay. If you make a mistake, you can fix it. If you have to apologize to somebody because you've said something offensive, you can apologize authentically and correct course. And she would say things like, just be kind, just be generous in spirit and be of service to humanity. And she lived her life by these values. So it was incredible, large messages from my parents at a very, very early age already. I think these were the guardrails, Lauren, that has taken me throughout my entire life. Every day, try to measure up to, am I doing what she challenged us to do? Where could I have done a little bit better every day? I know I can't be perfect because I'm human, but I'm trying to
mm,
work on all of those areas constantly. And with my father, when I finally asked him, so what, he didn't use vision and goals, but he said, just get yourself out of this. You learn your way out of this and educate your way out of it. And I said to him, what is it that you want us to do? And he said, just please, will you get your matric? Just get your matric,
mm,
and we know what the statistics are. I don't have to tell you that. Even today, all these many years and decades later. So there's tons of work to do in the education departments, but there are also pockets of excellence, because what happened was, when I looked around me and I didn't see any children my age, finishing high school, never mind. Girls especially were not finishing at all. And still a huge number of them never finish high school if they manage to get there. And these are all because of the race, gender, disability, and other biases and prejudices that were in our society. And now there's a whole lot of, the financial gap, the digital gap, all the divides that are there. So there's enormous amount of work still for us to do. Anyway, long story short, I managed to get to matric. We had to live with my grandmother, my mother's mother, because it became too dangerous to walk with my sister up and down that road. I still wouldn't walk there today. And so we lived in the week with my grandmother, and in the over the weekends we could go home. And it was tough for the two of us, because we were growing up and we wanted to play and do things, and and she was tough. But I have deep gratitude to her for teaching us about discipline, because discipline was very important for me, and still is, in the chaos of life. Even in a day like today, it's like, don't get anxious, don't fret, don't fuss, just be polite to people. You'll get through the queue. If you're late, you'll make another plan. But her thing was, you never ought to be late for anything. So plan your time properly, and she will let you play till 5 o'clock. But if you come in there 5 minutes past 5, then there's no play tomorrow. Then you think about how you can do better the next day.
mm.
And so it was about discipline and diligence and dedication and determination. It's kind of the 4 Ds I always think about when I think about her, and I want to, show gratitude to her today, even as I talk to you now, as hard as it was
Mm.
for us. And I finally got to matric in 1979. I had no idea what I was going to do after matric. I just knew I had to find a job and go to work and help with the financials at home, as we promised. And then two teachers sat me down. They probably sat everybody down, but for me, this was incredibly special. They sat me down in the middle of that year and they said to me, you know what? You are not shooting the lights out necessarily. You're not the brightest pea in the pod here. We know you're working hard, but you're
Sure.
not getting the A grades. But we do believe that you have the potential to do much, much more than you think you are capable of. You can do so much more. And I was kind of, I can listen to the first piece and cringe, but I had to listen to the second piece. And I think this is where I also, learned the lesson of listening and what it is that you choose to listen to, what it is you choose not to listen to. And I could have just fallen over and felt terrible after the first sentence. But after the second sentence, I said, so what is it? What is it that you think I can actually do? So they said, we want you to go home tonight and talk to your family about university. And I was kind of, wow, they actually think I can go to university. It is never part of my worldview, never part of any conversation that I've had with anybody ever. And so I was so excited. I thought, wow, they really do believe in me. And it's an amazing feeling that one gets when people actually believe in you before you believe in yourself. And it's a very powerful and empowering feeling. I mean, even for me as a young girl, then about 17 years old, not sure about where I was going to in this life, just knew I had to get to matric. And here these two teachers sat down and had this conversation with me. I went home that night. I sat with my parents. It was a story about we don't have money and we don't have time. You're going to have to pass and you're going to have to do your chores and you're going to have to get a Saturday job. I said, I will do all that stuff. I will do it. And then I got a bursary from government. And in those days, you got allocated a bursary, obviously according to your race group or whatever. And in my case, it was you could choose to be a teacher, a nurse, or a social worker, and government would pay for that. So how they picked those three job categories, I don't know, but I picked the teacher one because I literally only had 5 minutes to do so, and I thought teachers resonate with me. I can maybe be a good teacher someday in my lifetime, and maybe that's what I need to do. Then they helped me with the government bursary forms, and off it went. And then I got into the University of the Western Cape, and I started my BA degree in 1980. It was a very tough year, 1980, because it was the educational uprising in South Africa, one of the huge ones that happened. There were multiple of these events that happened, but it was students saying no to government on a whole, uh, a raft of policies and regulations that would completely cement, apartheid forever and relegate us to, some zero zone of society and keep us there. So I became a little bit of an activist at university, and I realized I started to link the dots between my own poverty, my own socioeconomic circumstances, the regime of the day, and what education could actually unlock for me. I really began to understand that in a much clearer way than I'd ever done before. And the university shut down during the year because of all the trouble there. I had to cancel my bursary and my studies, and I had to go and find a job because we just didn't know when this was gonna start up again and what the impact was going to be. And so I went and I tried to find some jobs. I went from pillar to post and had some interviews for little things here and there. But by September of that year, I still hadn't found a job, and I can only resonate. And my heart really goes out to the youth of our country today. So many, such high unemployment for our youth. I think it's a huge challenge that we face as South Africans and as leadership, and we're going to need to fix that very quickly, because I don't think we can grow our country when we have so many young people who are unemployed. And that feeling of, not being seen, not being heard, not being wanted, and not being valued and not being worthy when you go and people just say, go away. And so I went back to the university and I begged and pleaded to cancel my cancellations, and they finally let me back in. And then I thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to finish this. And then I graduated. I went to teach for 4 years, which is what you had to do when you got that bursary. So I taught English for 4 years at a school in Lansdowne in Cape Town. And while I was teaching, I decided, well, I may as well carry on studying. I could do one degree and I postgraduate diploma in education. I may as well keep going. And then I quite literally went the whole hog all the way to the doctorate, as you know, while I was working. And I landed a scholarship to Harvard, something I never ever dreamed was possible in my life. If it wasn't for my mother-in-law that clipped a piece of newspaper out for me that said Harvard South Africa Fellowship now open for application, I was kind of, wow, when she showed it to me, I said, do you really understand what this means? She said, well, if you don't apply, you'll never know. So she was also kind of like, do it, like really urging me along. I would never have thought to do that. So this is again where the listening comes in. And sometimes you have to listen to voices that you might never listen to, like your mother-in-law and other voices that giving you really good direction. And, you might miss a trick because you didn't listen and you didn't act on it. So they send, at this moment still, they send 5 people every year to Harvard, and all your academics are fully paid for, but you need to get through the academic hoops. So off I went, and I did a second master's there in education, and then I had an amazing supervisor who said, do the doctorate. And I said, I got no money. And he said, first get in, it's a global competition. So I applied and I did all the stuff I needed to do. And I got in with no money, and I came back to Cape Town, and I said to Kevin, please, will you go with me to Harvard? I got into the doctoral program, and just an amazing partner. So I've learned the importance of partnerships. I've learned the importance of real unconditional love. I've learned, what it's like to be in a relationship where there is, such a willingness for another person to give so much of themselves to me, so that I could thrive and I could flourish, and they would support me. So we got married in 1992, and off we went together to Harvard. In 93, I started a degree. 97, I graduated with a doctorate. In 95, we gave birth to our son, Jamie, right in the middle of all of that. We came on with the
Wow.
doctorate and the baby. And and it was a wonderful day coming to Cape Town International Airport, and the family, and how proud they were. And it was, my heart still is, just warms when I think about that moment. And I just wanted to do them all proud because they all just got behind me. And yes, I had a lot of fear and anxiety. I worried about what if I failed and I didn't make it, and to come home and tell everybody that I didn't manage it. And I thought to myself, I can never put myself and them in that situation. So I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to get through this thing. Anyway, I came back and I wanted to work in the education department of the Western Cape. I didn't get a job there. I had a couple of interviews, no job. And that was in 1997, just at the turn of, the tide of our democracy in the country. And I was so disappointed. I have no idea what I'm going to do now. And then Southern Life was looking for a training manager. And I don't know if you recall Southern Life, but it was my first foray into corporates, and I figured if I can teach in a classroom, I can teach in a lecture hall, I can teach in the workplace. So off I went and I applied, and they were not happy with too many qualifications, no corporate experience. Put you on a 6-month probation, see how you do. Learn as much as you can. Let's see how we go. And that was a massive door that opened for me. And I was terrified, taking that daunting step into a space that I had absolutely no clue what I was getting myself into here. And I learned so much in the time that I was there. So I'm truly, truly grateful for taking that leap of faith, which is another message I like to teach when I'm talking to students, when I'm talking at some of these, events, to say to people, sometimes opportunity comes in ways that you don't even begin to imagine, but you have to give yourself that opportunity. You have to take that leap of faith. And so I did that. And the rest is really history, because then I started to get into, HR roles. We moved to Pretoria from Cape Town. We then moved to Sandton. I held roles, head of HR at Reckitt's, head of HR at South African Revenue Services, at Nedbank, at Standard Bank, and then came home and was head of HR at Woolworths as well. But the thing to conclude the story is, I used to come up and down from Pretoria, Joburg, to Cape Town to Christmas and holidays, all sorts of things. And on the 3rd of January 2003, we were driving back from a wonderful holiday in Cape Town. And Jamie was 7 years old at the time, and we had a terrible accident just past the airport, the Cape Town International Airport, just on the N2. And we lost Jamie, our only child, in that car accident that day. I was 24 hours touch and go. Kevin was seriously injured, and it was the most devastating time of our lives. And the healing took me some time to recover. I can never get over it, but I have to put one foot in front of the other every single day and move myself, consciously move myself forward. And as I always say, you know, a lot of us suffer huge devastation. We suffer loss, we suffer trauma and tragedy, and incredible pain and injustice. And the world expects us just to carry on, you know, as if nothing had happened. And then somehow we buy into that and we tell ourselves we just have to carry on, you know. We don't give ourselves time to heal. We don't know where to go and ask for help. We, you know, we still stigmatize emotional wealth and psychological safety. So we don't want to sign up for those kinds of programs in the event anybody ever finds out that you're getting help. With all my psychological studies, all my studies in psychology, I still thought, I'm not going to do all that stuff. I will go back to work. I was off for 6 months on sick leave. And Ricketts was incredibly compassionate in terms of telling me that they will find somebody to fill in the space for me. I must go and do my healing, come back when it's all done. And the upshot of that was that for me today, doing the roles I do, I want to immerse organizations in this philosophy of caring for their people. And in this fast moving consumer goods company that is absolutely ruthless about targets and efficiencies and running on limited resources and maximizing it all as much as they can, they still found empathy for me. They still sent me good wishes. Entire mother's house was filled with flowers and good wishes from all over the world because I was responsible for Africa, Middle East. And so this has stayed with me as something that has driven my purpose. Because when I'd finally gone for the help, Kevin and I, when I had finally discovered that I needed to lift myself up and use my intellectual capability, use my emotional capability, use my social quotient, if you like, in terms of the relationships with people around me that uplift me, that care for me, that inspire me, that love me, that want to see me flourish and not go down that very, very desperate hole of grief and despair, which is so easy to go down, and so many of us never can come out of that because we get so deep down into it and we don't see light at the end of the tunnel. I deliberately try to talk to this often because I believe we need to create spaces for these kinds of conversations, these healing conversations to happen. And so I pulled on all of those anchors and whatever spirituality means. And I said to myself, you got to pick yourself up now, and try to put one foot in front of the other. And some days, if you put 2 steps back and 1 step forward, that is also okay, and kind of work with myself, work with others around me. And so Lauren, Jamie would be 31 on the 24th of May if he was alive. He was 7 years old when we lost him. And I promise you, it was like yesterday, still in my mind. And as I talk through my journey, I can never leave that piece out because I shared it because I believe it's a part of who I am. It's a part of my journey. And if it can uplift and inspire anyone, then it would have all been worth it. And I think I had to repurpose myself quite literally after that. I had to say, I'm still alive. Why am I here? Ask the deep existential questions. And what is my purpose every day when I get up? What is it that I want to do? I'm an HR professional. I can make decisions that can impact thousands of people's lives. I'm now on boards as a non-executive director and chairs of some boards. And I know that every decision I make, I can shift the needle for all of those people. I can widen the lens. I can give opportunity. I can speak truth to power, and I can bring healing, and I can bring all of that experience that I've had into how we create organizations that really care about their people. So I know that was a long answer to your short question, Lauren. But I thought I needed to share that with you. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but there are lots of stories within those stories, of course, and lots of learnings within within the journey, which I documented quite a bit in my first book, Swimming Upstream. But it's a reality for a lot of people that we walk around, with a lot of angst and pain and sadness and despair. And there's never an outlet to be able, to talk about this. And all we do is that we get compressed to do more. and pressure to do more, and we never get to fill our own glass, our own soul, so that we can give to the world in a better way.
Wow, that I mean, I kind of don't, you've answered all my questions in your story, and I, and it's just so inspiring. You know, the lessons you've learned along the way. You know, often people would want to say, "Wow, you're so resilient." I have a bad relationship with that word resilience because it kind of speaks to that what you referred to about like just having grit and determination and pushing
Mm,
through and digging
mm,
deep
mm.
and actually what I'm hearing from you is kind of it's the true essence of resilience, which was learning to stop and check in and do the deep work and the hard work and
Yeah,
take the time out and then having the courage to share your story because I think, you know, especially in the senior rooms that you occupy, people are way too afraid to speak up about their weaknesses or vulnerabilities. And I love how you courageously and authentically share it. And it's a huge strength that you carry with you and being able to destigmatize it. And I think that's, you know, so much of the work I do with leaders in my coaching practice is trying to help them to understand, well, what sits beneath your busyness? What is causing you to just push through and keep going and then, you know, filter that down to the people below you? And how do you stop long enough so that you can actually confront that? But it's
yeah,
very painful. So
yes.
I suppose based on your experience, like, and I know you said you had an amazing company that supported you, but if we want to kind of help other leaders that are struggling or HR professionals, what can we share with them to help them kind of feel safe enough to also say, I'm struggling, or this is what's happened to me in my past, and I'm carrying this baggage and it's impacting the way I'm showing up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, lots of not only HR professionals are carrying the burden of, what the response is to a question like that. And I think it came through very much in COVID, where none of us would have expected a black swan like that. Child had gone
Mm,
through quite an evolution from being purely transactional and administrative in the form of what was then called personnel management. You might recall those wonderful words that we used to use. And then it
yeah.
kind of, morphed into human resource management or human capital management, some of the new flavors. And then we, had the wisdom of Dave Ulrich that, talked about business partners and the concept of partnership with your business. And now we talk about CHRO and Chief HR Officer. We talk about Chief People Officer now, because a lot of organizations have figured that, people are now very, very key. And if we talk about people in its broader sense in every organization has employees, every organization has customers, every organization has communities around it. Every organization has regulators and shareholders and stakeholders, and they're all looking at us to see how do we deal with humanity, and
Mhm.
what sorts of organizations are we creating that has sincere social impact and lasting social impact, that are not just ticking boxes in a program of CSI, but who really are living the the DNA of leadership that cares about people end to end, and ensuring that we are reviewing our leadership behaviors and creating cultures that are inclusive, where people feel they belong, where people feel they can flourish and thrive, where people feel they can be vulnerable as well. And that it's actually okay to be vulnerable, because we are human beings and we've all been through something or other. Some of us suppress it because the pain is just too incredible to bear, and some of us have the courage to speak about it, because speaking about it also is part of the healing for ourselves, but also maybe potentially part of the healing for someone else. And then, what are our leadership practices every day? How do we speak to people when we speak to in the investor community, when we speak to shareholders, when we speak to angry activists in the environmental area? We always, seem to, you know, we need to do more. And what is that tone that we are setting as leaders from the top? And how do we cascade that down into our organizations? I remember, Lauren, trying to talk about um, caring in a boardroom, or just using the word care, or even daring to use the word love in a boardroom context. I mean, I got rolling eyes and people saying to me, you know what? We are running a business here.
Mm.
These
Mm.
things are soft and fluffy. HR professionals, you can go and do all that stuff. But here we are in this boardroom here to run a business. I said, well, let me tell you, if you don't care about your people, no one will want to work here. If you don't care about your customers, no one will want to buy your services and your products. If you don't care about your community, well, then you're just on a road to absolute nowhere. And if you don't care about your stakeholders and shareholders, and you don't know how to relate to them, and you don't know how to align with them and to listen to what they're saying, then you're not going to exist for very long, And there was some point, I think, at which they heard me, and there was a little heart that somehow came into the page the one page that corporates love, with the vision and the mission and the key objectives and the values at the bottom, and the nice drawing and that stuff that we stick on the walls. And finally a little heart appeared to say we do our work with heart, and that was a unique differentiator, at the time. But one is to be bold and courageous, to be able to sit as a chief people officer or an HR professional, to give leadership in that moment. So yes, you're a partner, but you also are around the table and on the seat and at the table, because you have a voice, and you have to be the voice that speaks to those kinds of things. And people will say that that's soft, but it's unfortunate that its nomenclature is the way it is. But it is the toughest thing to do when you are hard-nosed in every other way, when it comes to targets and pushing people and calling it performance, when you want people to be on all day, all night, and you don't realize that there are families, that there are other responsibilities that people have. And I think when COVID came, as I started off saying, it was almost a reset, because we were the triage then as HR. We were the ones who were, trying to say, where are the people that are ill? Maybe they must go to hospital. Here are some places that they can go. Here's help that you can get. Don't come to work. A laptop that you can use it to work at home. Here's Wi-Fi that you can use to work at home. And starting to put all of those things together that had never been done before, and getting people to still be productive without having to come to the office during an incredibly stressful time. A lot of us have never recovered from that COVID, actually, because we lost loved ones during the time. We had to be working, we had to be carers, we had to be taking care of health was a big issue. So there's a huge hangover, and people might think that COVID is now gone and we must all just move on. It has changed us quite fundamentally, actually. And so HR jumped in and led. And so the appeal now is to HR professionals and to chief people officers: stop asking about whether you have a seat at the table. You are at the table. Please lead. Lead with confidence. Lead with credibility. Lead courageously. Take your CEO along the journey with you. Take your C-suite along with you. When you go to board meetings, and now I'm on the other side of the table myself, I'm listening for the words that will give me comfort. This organization is understanding what I'm trying to tell them as a board member, that I'm hearing. I'm not just seeing the reports on headcount and retention and remuneration. I'm hearing about the stories of human beings operating optimally and in a healthy, functioning environment where they can progress and advance and learn and grow and be happy in some way. And we know what all the pressures. Now we have geopolitical pressures, we have AI, we have um, economic pressure. We have all sorts of challenges. Now is the time for us to be proactive in saying, what are the kinds of solutions we are bringing to the table? Because some of the things we did before are obsolete. They no longer actually work. They are not fit for purpose. They are not preparing us for, the future effectively. We cannot even find, people who are digitally savvy, never mind with proper digital skills that can take us into the next 5 to 10 years. So what sort of future are we thinking about when we are thinking about preparing this organization to be sustainable over many generations?
Sure. So much in there that I can jump on. I suppose the thing that I always kind of harp on about is you have to be well in order to lead well. And you know,
Yes.
what I'm hearing from you so strongly is it's not just HR's job to keep the organization well. The leaders need to keep themselves well so that they can lead well. And HR needs to almost champion that. But I guess my next question leading on from that, given that you've had to kind of hit your head against that brick wall so many times to get leaders to eventually realize that, what are the kind of, if you can distill it to like, what are the things that eventually land for a leader that helps them realize like they have to be taking care of themselves and their people. That is what performance, and that's how they're going to hit their targets. And no matter how many times I think as HR or, you know, in my profession, we try and send that message, there's always, yeah, but there's the bottom line. Or, you know, we
Yes.
can't, like you said, we're running a business here. We can't just think about that soft stuff. So what were the things that you think eventually helped the penny drop for the leaders you worked with?
Well, you know what I tried to do, Lauren, and it's probably the little bit of an academic in me. So the doctorate did help a little bit, is to go and do research, go and find out what are other organizations doing, get involved in professional bodies and listen to what other HR directors and other, what other board members are doing, what are the conversations that they are having, and then come with a philosophy and a hypothesis and put it out there and say, well, this is what the research is telling us. This is empirical research. These are verbatims that I've picked up, case studies that I've picked up. And why are organizations that are thriving through all these difficulties today, why are they thriving? So, and then everybody sits and then they're not quite sure what the answer to that is. So let's unpack that a little bit and let's understand what that means. And all of us extremely busy, every day. It's like, how is it possible that we can be running around in the way that we are for so many hours of so many days and still not, being able to find our sense of North Star and find our sense of we know where we're going. We have direction. We've got guardrails. I have people who are amped up to do what they need to do. We're giving them sufficient time off to rest and recover. We, as leaders, we take a good hard look at ourselves from time to time. How many times we talk about leadership development. Leadership development is not a mini MBA. It's, and I don't have a problem with the MBA. Now, I encourage people to do that. But it's to go off and reflect. Have a good look at each one of ourselves and how we're working together. What are the individual strengths we bring? What are the individual challenges that we have? How do we work across the piece as a team that is collaborative, that is cohesive, that is listening to each other, giving each other the time of day, that we drop the busyness signal down to where we can actually listen and to where it's quiet enough to actually think and to stop the madness just a little bit. And when that happens, it creates an enormous amount of awkwardness for people. I've seen that happen because one tries to facilitate this kind of thing. And it's like, where are we going to with this? And when is it going to be done? It's like not a comfortable place to be, but it's within that discomfort. I think that we realize that we're all human beings here and that we all have aspirations and we all want to achieve certain things. And that is, it's a competitive environment that we are in, and we want to be the ones, the bright gems that shine out there. But we can be more than that because we have the potential to do much more. We don't just want to be great at the job for the short term. We want to be building something for the much longer term. You want it for your children and your children's children. So if you start to think about it like more personally, if you start to reflect and do the inner work and being able to articulate how it is you're actually feeling in a particular moment when you do a check-in around the table and you ask people what's going on for them, and you ask them to give, give me a little bit of feedback about how you think I'm doing. We all are sort of dislocated. We all think that everything's, hunky-dory. I always find that if you give a person just a little bit of an opportunity, there will be things that you will discover about someone that you have never known, and if you worked with them for so many years, you got no idea, what their real, purpose is in the way they understand it. You don't know what healing processes they're going through. You don't know what terrible things have happened to them. Not that you can get that close to people in the workplace. Often you can't, because people build all sorts of things around themselves, and they have this impenetrable, shield around them that deflects anything that might want to come through it, because, you have to be strong, and you have to show up, and you have to be busy, and there's the fear of, people getting too close to me. And because, there's still that command and control thing. But we're seeing, I see a lot of behavioral elements, because I'm so queued up to see it all the time. And
Mm.
I hear the voices, I look at the body language, I look at the sociometrics across the table, who's talking to who's looking at who. And you can see that there's sometimes a quietness. You have to really worry, because most people speak a lot in the meetings, and then and then there's the dominating voices, the loud ones that talk all the time, and then there are the quiet ones. But when they do speak, it's incredibly profound. But often
Mm.
the nugget is missed because of the rest of the noise that's going on. So for
Mm.
me, those people then begin to disengage. They become quiet and quieter. And if nobody watches, they become detached. And they
Mm.
have already kind of, you know, um, psychologically moved on. And then we say, but we don't have a problem with retention. They've already quit,
Mm.
way along the way. And that energy they take back to their teams, and then it plays itself out there. And then there's that, I'm too busy to reflect. I don't have time
Yeah.
for all that. Why don't we just take a walk through the garden, at, if there's one at the office, or go somewhere off site, and give everybody just a chance to breathe, um, create moments where there are pauses, intentional pauses, and
Mm.
ask people what's happening to them within those pauses. And we try to do a lot of
Mm.
this in different ways in different organizations. But I think that, often we're just in the mode of managing the chaos. We never take the time to actually slow down enough. And what I try to bring into these scenarios is, um, helping the board, or helping the executives to calm down enough within themselves to think about how they are actually feeling in a particular moment,
Mm.
and try to ask, is this healthy? Is this good for me? Is this taking me forward, or is this creating stagnation for me? And the cynics, and the skeptics, the people who are dismissive, and there are people that go underground, and then leaders will turn around and say, no one's leaving, so everything's fine. When
Mm.
they've already left, but no
Yeah.
one's noticed. So I think that and we do exit interviews when people have
Mm.
left, and people will tell you the most wonderful stories. And then, even if we pick up a recurring theme with a few exit interviews from different people who leave, we'll still say, we've already addressed the stuff, and we move on. We don't really want to dig into some of those things, because it will mean that, we have to change some of what we were thinking, and some of how we were behaving. And there's no apology even, there's no course correction. There's no, we'll
Mm.
just kind of like just get on with it. And they do that only because they think that they're exuding confidence when they do that, but they don't realize that, it doesn't encourage people to perform. It doesn't invite people to, to give back of themselves in any way. They just do the absolute minimum and the home. So it's those kinds of things that worry me, and those kinds of things that I'm very in tune with. It's the kind of thing that I want to encourage, uh, you know, HR professionals and just general leaders to tune into more, because this is where the breakdown starts to happen, and this is where the real risk lies. We'd like to do risk registers, and yes, we must do that. And the other day I was asking, in the preparation for a board meeting, I was asking one of the HR heads that I work with, what are your key HR risks in the last 6 months? What would you say the key HR risks are? And she said, well, it's retention of people, it's stress and burnout, it's succession. And I said, so how come those big topics are not in your HR report for the board? And she's like, oh, okay. I'll include it. I said, that needs to be a standing item on the agenda from now going forward. Because we need to understand that. And we keep on pushing for this performance thing, which is another thing I want to say. If we can just pause for a second and think about what it is that we are doing. So we create these scorecards, we put metrics in, financial metrics, operational metrics, systems metrics, and people metrics, transformation. All of those things are there, and then we go through the year and we check off what we're doing, what we're not doing so well. But where is the ongoing conversation? With people to check in kind of how are we doing? Put the scorecard aside, what else is happening here that you think is going to prevent you from getting there? And we don't see, the warning signs because we're just ticking boxes. We don't see what's happening in the meta of all of that because we don't connect with people, heart to heart, human to human. It's a transactional thing. And I think that's sort of where organizations come adrift and lose the spirit of people, lose the soul of people. And they will stay, but you're not going to get too much out of them. And so for me, I believe we have enormous potential really to do more, to reawaken and reconnect with people in a very different way. I think, we're in such a complex state of the world right now. There are wonderful opportunities to say what good leadership isn't, because we can see it being paraded every day. It's visible.
Yeah.
It's never been clearer, to us what we don't want in this life and what kind of leaders are the leaders of the future, the people we want to follow, the people we want to aspire to be like, the role models, So it's clearer now than it's ever been. And people are less and less tolerant of that command control, that push hard, that, almost bullying behavior that starts to unfold in organization. And this addiction to constant activity and getting stuff done to the point where you're so exhausted that you can't even get up in the morning. You've got no will to face it, but you have to feed your family and you've got to pay the school fees and, and do all of that. And then on top of that, many of us, even those who are earning decent salaries, are in financial difficulty because of the way the world is developing, and we have all those anxieties and challenges that affect our close relationships, our partnerships, our marriages, our family, situations. And people have to come in with all of that. They can't leave it at the front door. If we were just a little more in tune with some of these elements as leaders more broadly, and owned it and were stewards of, human beings and the capability and what you can bring out of them in terms of the magic and the talent that lies within them, that often goes unnoticed and undervalued. I'm daunted by that, but I'm also excited that we are at a point, Lauren, that you build a platform like this and you do a podcast and you give people an opportunity to articulate some of these complexities and to reflect on it. And I just want to salute you for that.
Wow, thank you. And I think, for me, yes, you've said there's a lot of complexity and it can be quite daunting because there's a lot of not great leadership out there and we can see the impact. But listening to you, even through the complexities, I think I'm so inspired by your passion because you sit in these senior places and see the challenges, and yet you still, after all these years, feel hopeful and passionate, and you yourself feel inspired by some of the stuff you see or don't see, but the opportunity that's there. And I think that passion of yours is so contagious. And I suppose for somebody like me that's a bit kind of younger in the profession, it gives me hope that, we can still make an impact and kind of shift the leadership thinking. Really, you use the word so many times, human. We are human beings. We are human beings. And I guess that for me feels like such an essence of, it's how do we treat ourselves as human beings and each other as human beings? And in that we have stuff, we have emotions and we have mental health stuff and we have physical stuff. And we need to be able to bring all of that not that we become each other's therapists, but that we say we are human beings and we are inherently flawed. And as a leader, you're not expected to stand up there and be this all-knowing, all-seeing kind of perfect person. You're allowed to also be human. And I think that's the essence of what I'm hearing and kind of your sharing is for leaders, how can you give yourself permission as a leader to be a human being and care for yourself as a human being. And from that place, if you have that self-reflection, it also then will create that space for others to be able to care for themselves.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. The caring goes beyond being just nice, because some of us think if we're nice to people, they'll be nice to us and we'll all play together and it will be, it will be wonderful. But you can have this kind of fake happiness thing happening as well, and we pretend that everything's okay when it's actually not. So I think that it goes beyond, and then we don't know how to deal with conflict when it comes, because now we've been nice to people and we confuse nice and kind because they're two complete different constructs. But it's really about the courage to rather be respected, the courage to deal with conflict, the courage to, in your kindness, give feedback that is rigorous to people, and that is respectful to people, that is honest and real. Also helping people to understand that taking time out is not a nice to have. It is not a perk. It is, if you're to be sustainable, you have to do that. And I'm probably not the greatest example of of what I'm speaking about now. And there've been a few, chirps about that recently about, your board loads and how is it humanly possible for anybody to do this much stuff? I mean, to do it properly. But it is so important to find the time with yourself, find the time with the very close people around you, and not feel the guilt of I'm supposed to be doing something else with my time. And being able to feel that you're in a safe enough place that if you're not feeling that you are be treated like, to squeeze every bit of you out of now, over the short period of time, you're not going to be sustainable into the future, is to be able to speak up when you are completely overwhelmed, to say, to make the choices, to seek guidance and to say, "Look, I actually can't do all this stuff, but maybe I need to reshape my portfolio and rethink what it is that I want to do. And I need to find time, to do different things with different people. And that's okay, to do that. It's not a sign of weakness, or it's not a sign of lack of responsibility or trying to aggravate, your leaders to say you're not committed, you're not passionate about your stuff. Sometimes we can just be honest enough to be able to. And then if a person is nice to you, you're kind of like, how can I go and tell a person that I'm overwhelmed? How can I not show up for them?
No, I think that is so important because people, and you mentioned it earlier, often people are like, oh, that's the soft stuff. But actually it's the hard stuff. And it's not just about, kind of that velvet glove and being nice. It's sometimes what I say, it's the iron fist as well. It's holding people accountable, having the tough conversations, but it's still seeing people as human beings, not just as a number. I mean, I think, what excites me is having somebody like you sitting on all these boards where this message, at least in the boards that you're sitting in, can be shared, because I think, so much of that pressure comes from the boards. When I sit with C-suite kind of leaders in coaching, they say to me, I have to meet this target and the shareholders are putting the pressure on me. And part of what I want to say is it's also up to you to protect your people, to push back and say, like, of course we want to work for excellence and of course we want to achieve, but if it's at the cost of our health, our people's health, then I'm not prepared to do that. And I suppose wish more leaders had the courage to say, like, if this is going to cost the health of my people, I'm willing to kind of put my foot down and say, we're not going to push any further. And I guess just listening to you speak like this, it gives me hope that maybe these conversations are happening in some boardrooms, not enough, but in some, where we can start shifting that message of, just be productive at all costs. And I love just what you keep saying, which is obviously the title of the podcast, Beneath the Busy, is how do we just create the moments to pause and reflect and say, like, what are we actually being busy about? And
Mm-hmm.
is it actually effective? Is this
Mm.
actually necessary? And kind of being more comfortable in the discomfort of that silence,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
really difficult for many people. So my last question that I always ask people is, if let's say somebody forgets everything we've spoken about in this last hour, if they can't remember anything, what's one thing that you just would love kind of people that are listening to this to take away that as kind of, the thing that they sit with after listening to the episode?
I think it's important to recognize that we are humans, we are not machines. And
Yeah.
that as humans, we also need to understand that if we were not there, it's okay. The place is not going to fall over. The team will
Yeah.
continue, to do the work if it's a sustainable workplace. And we
Mm.
share and have a distributed sense of responsibility for getting things done. It's not just all up to me to do it all by
Mm.
myself. And so, just give yourself the permission to stop and pause, reflect and breathe. When you're feeling that vulnerability, when you're feeling like, you're overwhelmed, know that there are tons of other people that are feeling the same way. You prioritize your own sustainability. Take good care of yourself. We only get one chance at a life worth living, at our health that's worth looking after. The livelihood that we are trying to grow for ourselves and our families are as important to us. So we must keep on doing that, but we will not have a livelihood if we do not have a life.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. Shirley, just thank you so much. The wisdom, the insights, it's just an absolute gift. And I'm just so inspired, as I said earlier, to know that there's somebody like you having these conversations in the hard places with the very senior uppers up there. Yeah, I think you just are so inspiring in the way that you show up always completely authentically and just so willing and generous to share of yourself. So thank you for this time. And yeah, we'll definitely cross paths again because I will be following you as I always do.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I love the work that you do, and whatever I can
Thank
do
you.
to engage with you on some of these things, I'm so happy to do it. Thank you very much. All the best. Have a
All
good
right.
one.